Good morning. I had made a couple of videos in the past couple of days, and I apologize. I haven't gotten them up yet. At this point, my computer's still down. But I had made mention of a radio broadcast that I had heard on Monday down here in the DFW. For those of you who don't recognize those letters, it's Dallas-Fort Worth. By a guy on a sports radio show. The guy's name is Gavin Dawson. And I just happened to catch it by accident, but God is good, so there was a reason for it. Anyway, I'm going to play that portion of the broadcast for you, but I just wanted to give you a little background. Now, this was a white guy that made these comments, and I'm going to play a little bit of the G-Bag Nation, which is 105.3 The Fan down here in Dallas, and so you can get a good look at the person. And I got a lot of respect for the person. Now, I'm going to play the entire podcast, so I ask that you bear with me because they start off talking about Stephen A. Smith. But as he gets into the podcast, he basically lays it out exactly why African Americans are behind the eight ball and have been behind the eight ball for such a long time. And I apologize, it's going a little long on the video that I got off of YouTube, but I'm going to try to stop it right here. Okay, as you can see, Gavin Dawson is on the left of the screen. Now I'm going to play the the podcast, so that you can hear exactly what was said.
Friday had developed with Stephen A. Smith. He came in hot with some Jason Garrett takes. You know, he's kind of a Cowboys hater. And I thought about this when it happened, and I kind of rolled my eyes and moved on. But then I was thinking about it over the weekend, and I decided that I wanted to talk about it here on the show, at least for one segment. So if you hadn't heard, here's what Stephen A. Smith had to say about the state of Jason Garrett and his job and all that.
Jason Garrett is the walking epitome.
He is.
Of
mediocrity.
The frustration.
Yep.
And the disgust.
Yep.
And the unfairness and the proverbial glass ceiling that black folks continuously allude to that never come their way. It's a damn shame that this man is the head coach of this team, considering nothing but his record. I don't know him personally. I'm not taking anything away from him. I hear he's a wonderful man. He seems that way. God bless him and his family. I'm not wishing anything. I'm just saying that the benefits that he enjoys is one of significant privilege.
It is.
Fairness to Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. I am not sitting there, I'm not pointing out white when it comes to Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones just loves Jason Garrett. If this was another white coach that was doing this, Jerry Jones would have fired him already.
Yep.
He just has a special affinity.
He does.
The only reason I bring the black-white element into it is that I am challenging. When has a black coach had the benefit of such a relationship with an owner? You can say Marvin Lewis.
Just Marvin Lewis.
Well, Marvin Lewis has been to the playoffs 6 times.
He has.
He has been to the
He's
playoffs.
been far more
I think he
successful
needs to
than
win a
Jason
playoff
Garrett.
game.
I know.
But he has been to the playoffs 6 times.
He has.
I'm just saying.
So, there's a lot to get into there, isn't it? And I think Friday at this time when Mike Fisher brought it up, we're like, man, that we need more than just a couple of minutes to discuss it. I think, first of all, Skip was agreeing that Jason Garrett's incompetent as a coach right there. That hasn't been proven. I think it's unfair to say that Jason Garrett is only a coach because of his relationship with Jerry Jones or because of white privilege. I mean, his offense has put up a lot of points. He has a good culture. He has good accountability. I don't think he's ever been prejudicial for a second. And I don't think Stephen was trying to say that. He's just essentially talking about, number one, white privilege in the NFL. And then number two, on top of that, Jason Garrett's relationship with Jerry Jones, and that there'd never been a black coach that got to be the recipient of such a special type of relationship. And, being white is a big, big part of why a lot of coaches in the NFL have their jobs, is because it's a black league, but the owners are white. And my heart rate is probably going to double here because I get nervous when we bring stuff up like this. But if you're confused by what Stephen A. Smith is referring to, and if you don't buy it, I wanted to throw out a quick bit of history that might not have totally been covered in class. For a long time, intentionally, America went through great lengths, economic, educational, political, infrastructure discrimination, to make sure whites almost always got the upper hand with education, with jobs, with wealth, and it really hasn't totally stopped. We're just making baby steps and we're trying to get out of it. There were 200 years of slavery. There were another 100 years of segregation. There's been 50 years since. And I don't know that we understand fully how much residue, how much subconscious thought is left over from those earlier parts of America. We're making baby steps. And I think a lot of people are consciously trying to improve conditions for opportunity. But where open and intentional discrimination stopped, a much more subtle preference or bias has sort of taken over. And you can't snap your fingers and make centuries of social programming just go away. So now, through very direct and intentional engineering our economic and our social conditions, white people have all the money. We own the businesses. We trust people that look like us just like every other group of humans would. And it's not any of our fault that we were born into this. But once we become aware of it, it is partially the NFL's responsibility, our responsibility, and the rest of the world to help try to remedy it. For the longest time, well into the 1900s, blacks couldn't inherit anything, which ensured they could never give their kids a head start, like Jerry Jones got when his businessman father turned things over to him. That's a head start. If you're black, you couldn't inherit things. Whatever you died with was just gone. When the Great Depression happened, most Americans had to refinance their mortgages. Nobody could afford anything. Black people were denied access to those programs. So essentially, our grandparents' generations saw what little wealth they had disappear. During the Depression, if you were black and you had a job, you could be immediately removed from it as long as there was one white person in town that needed a job. So there's no financial legacy to turn over. There's no track record. There's no assets that, the power of compounding interest. If the Native Americans had just taken $1 that they were given in a treaty with the white man in the 17 and 1800s, they would have billions of dollars now. $1 invested over centuries compounds into billions of dollars. At 8%, I think it is. I read in Tony Robbins' book. So there have been so many rules for decades and really for centuries that disallowed black people from getting money. There was a rule on the other side of slavery that on payday, black people had to go spend all of the money immediately. They couldn't keep any in a bank or at home. It was against the law. Imagine what kind of an impact that has on future generations with the ideas of savings. Returning soldiers from wars got the GI Bill. only to find out it could only be used at black colleges. And for a long time, there just weren't enough spots in classrooms. You're talking about financial, political, and educational discrimination that was open in public. And when it got shut off finally in the 60s, people stopped talking about it. And the reason they stopped talking about it is because it's horrifying what we did and how it impacts the future. You know, the great philosophers, when they would talk about history, they'd say, you have to know your history, because whether you know it or not, it shapes how you look at the world today. That history, if it's not addressed and cut out like the nasty virus that it is, intentionally, with the power of information and education, it will linger and it will stay there. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. By the way, there's about another 50 or 60 pieces of legislation that happened in the 20th century that we could tick off like this. You know, it goes on and on and on. And it's all for money. The rich are constantly trying to figure out how to get all of our money. And it's not just black people, it's white people too. They're trying to get all of our money too. It's just that black people have made easier victims of crimes. And we cannot, as white people, stand by any longer and allow it to continue. I'm not saying fire Jason Garrett. I'm saying let's be aware of our history and how it affects the circumstances for today. So what happens is there are plenty of white owners who have opening and opportunities, but they, you know, they're from the time where it actually still happened openly. They were raised with parents who were like, yes, of course you discriminate on black people. We wouldn't want black people to have jobs and have money. That's the owners of today's NFL teams. That's what their parents raised them to believe. And they're handing down subconsciously now some of those lessons, some of those biases. So it's definitely not just football. I wanted to bring that up. And I'm not looking at Jason Garrett like he's some sort of a racist for having this job, or Jerry Jones is some kind of racist. It's the circumstances that we have. And if we're going to act like it's the home of the free and the land of the brave and equal opportunity, we need to start doing our best to make sure there's equal opportunity, and the horrific crimes that us as white people committed in the past can begin to be remedied. It starts right in the DIS flipping D. You know, look at this. Oh, hey, there's a bunch of black people moving into Dallas. Let's all move to Frisco and McKinney and pass legislation there that funds our schools while we ignore the other schools. That happens again and again and again and again. The hospitals in the black neighborhoods, not as good. You know, it applies everywhere. It's not just the NFL. And again, it's not our fault that we were born into it. And now we have inept leadership that has no idea of how to put together this broken model. But once we become aware of it, we as Americans do have an obligation to help fix it. And understanding history will help tell us who we are, where we're going, our influences, our motivations today. And that might sound like it's some type of psychobabble mumbo jumbo, because when you grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever it was, that stuff they don't put in the history books. That stuff that they allow the poisonous idea of white supremacy to continue. Oh, well, you know, we're white, we're better, we just work harder and we save our money. You know, those blacks, they just, they can't get it together. That's why, I mean, they could go to school. There is dozens and dozens of pieces of legislation that intentionally put them in that spot. That is what Stephen A. Smith, working at Disney, was unable to explain to you. And that
Yeah, I couldn't have put that any better. This is a guy, white guy, wouldn't matter white, black, or in between, but he just laid it out exactly the way that it is. And I hope I don't get him in trouble when I post this video, because I like to listen to his radio show in the morning. But just thought I would put that out there and for your own edification. And if people disagree, hey, you're welcome to comment.